Good afternoon. I am not Bernie Sanders. I want to thank Jeremy Ben-Ami. I want to thank the J Street Board of Directors and all the volunteers for inviting me to this incredible gathering. I want to thank all of you for advocating for democracy and for diplomacy, especially in these trying times. I'm here today because I'm a progressive. I'm here today because I'm a Jew. And I'm here today because I believe in Israel. And I believe that the United States must continue to safeguard Israel's right to exist and its right to flourish. As a nation, we should protect Israel from daily threats and make sure that the Israeli military is the strongest in the region so that our allies never face a fair fight. I also believe that the best answer to any challenge to Israel's long-term security is two states, one for the Israelis and one for the Palestinians. And I'm here especially because I worry that people are starting to abandon this idea. Leaders here in Washington and in Israel have started to play coy about their support for the two-state solution, even redefining it. Increasingly, they have taken action that erodes the path forward. But there is only one path to a lasting peace. There is only one path that maintains Israel's status as both a democracy and a nation-state of the Jewish people, and that path is two states. And that is why this conference is so important, and that's why J Street is so important. You are one of the clearest voices calling for the two-state solution at a time when Israel's supporters stand between a rock and a hard place. On the one side, you have the most right-wing government in Israel's history. On the other, you have a growing number of people in the United States who confuse disagreement with disloyalty. 55 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was sitting in a prison reading the newspaper when he came across an open letter from a group of clergymen. The letter was to him. It criticized Dr. King for coming to Birmingham to protest. And so he wrote them back. He said, "I'm here because injustice is here." And he went on to compare himself to the Jewish prophets who left their villages to travel far and wide to tell people, "This is what the Lord says." Like them, Dr. King felt compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond his hometown. Dr. King finished that letter from the Birmingham jail 55 years ago today. And his words are just as important now as they were in 1963. They remind us not to stay home and stay silent when we see injustice. And they also remind us that the American instinct will always be to confront injustice wherever it may be. And that's why President Truman supported the creation of Israel. There were lots of reasons for him to simply stay out of it, to leave it to the British or to the United Nations. But he could not stand to see Jews languish in the concentration camps. He knew that the only way forward was for the United States to support the creation of the State of Israel. But today, U.S. support for Israel is in danger, and the threat comes from two places. First, it comes from anti-Semitism here in the United States, which has become a flood tide. In 1 year, anti-Semitic incidents have increased by nearly 60%. And frankly, it's coming from all sides. Philip Spencer, an emeritus professor of Holocaust and genocide studies at Kingston University, has documented how the Nazis were able to build a movement based on anti-Semitism. It's because the political parties never pushed back, not the Social Democrats or the communists in Germany, and not the resistance across the continent. We've got to remember this, because the obscene call of anti-Semitism must be condemned every time it is heard. And it's easy for us to look at another country or another political party and say, enough. Do better. It is a tougher conversation when the problem is in our own tent. But we know that we cannot look the other way when people who would otherwise be our progressive allies speak out of ignorance or fear or convenience, and they cross a moral line. And so we need to engage in dialogue with people who don't understand, who have questions about Israel's founding and Israel's current actions. We have to engage, but we have to show people where the moral lines are. Which brings me to the second thread of American support for Israel, and that is the smothering of debate and dialogue here in the United States. The parameters around our debate have gotten dangerously out of control. It's to the point where if you're not willing to see the United States pick any fight on behalf of the Israeli government, then you're not a friend of Israel. But we should not be afraid of debates or disagreements. These are the marks of democracy, not to mention the essence of what it means to be Jewish. Growing up in Honolulu, my dad argued about Israel with the head of my religious school, who argued with my rabbi, who argued with me. When I traveled to Israel with the National Federation of Temple Youth, I argued with my friends about Israel. And while you're here this week, I expect that you will argue amongst yourselves. It's what we do. We are not a monolith on these issues. That's the antithesis of our tradition as Americans and as Jews. Instead of fearing debate, we should fear belligerence and blind devotion. Scott Perlow, a rabbi of the Sixth and I congregation, has talked about the beauty and ethical understanding that Jewish homelessness has given us throughout history. That remains true today. We can still bring great clarity to the Jewish moral vision. And it's in the Jewish interest for others in Israel and around the world to be able to listen to different perspectives. So here's my view. We should not go back on a two-state solution. We should not move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem except as a condition of a peace process. We should not pull out of the Iran deal, which is the only thing keeping nuclear weapons out of the hands of our enemy. And we should take in as many refugees from Syria as we are capable of taking in. And if you don't agree with every single one of my views on Israel or American foreign policy, that's okay. We can carve out some space in the American political sphere for a difference of opinion. But at the moment, that space is far too small and far too private. If you look at my positions and put them in the 80s or 90s, they would be mainstream. If you compare my views on Israel to the views of the American public, right now I'd probably be right in the middle. But in Congress, I am on the left edge. And that cannot hold. In 2016, less than half of Jewish Americans felt that the Israeli government was sincere in its pursuit of peace. And younger Jews in the United States are even more doubtful. They are likely to say that the United States gives too much support for Israel. And we know that Israel faces the danger of anti-Semitism and the danger of foreign and domestic threats, but it also faces a more foundational danger if American political support for Israel is undermined. If we don't allow robust debate, if we don't allow people to feel comfortable to support the existence of Israel while questioning its government, periodically, then over time the American-Israeli relationship itself will fray. And so I'm committed to making the Democratic Party a big tent pro-Israel party where there's room for everyone from Bernie Sanders to me to Chuck Schumer. And I am committed to growing the number of progressives who care about Israel. But we do have a lot of work to do. As Dr. King wrote in his letter from Birmingham, Human progress does not roll in on wheels of inevitability. Progress for Israel, progress for democracy, and progress for peace will only come if we do the hard work and we do it ourselves. We are in a moment when the work is daunting. At times it feels like a worst-case scenario. But if there's one thing that I've learned from the past 15 months, it is this: the voices of the American people make a difference. They can keep our country on track, and as long as you continue to raise your voices, we will make progress together. Thank you for all you do.